So last time we got this Voronoi overlay working. Let's check it out. We can hover over these various places and the nearest line will highlight. That's pretty cool, but it only gets us part of the way there. Our goal is to reproduce this, where we actually draw a point and a label with the information that corresponds to that particular point. So in our case, with this coronavirus visualization, the label should say country, and it should also say the date of that point and the number of deaths. I think it's pretty doable. Let's start by rendering the point, meaning just that one little circle. I'll start by forking this one and renaming it to Voronoi overlay with labels. So I'm thinking in linechart.js, this is where we are currently rendering this Voronoi overlay. It's right here. And now's a good time to step back and think about the composition of all these things. See, rendering of the active line is not done by Voronoi overlay. It's done by this code over here that responds to the current state of active country name. I think we need something similar to that. And we can put it right on top of this path. Let's put it right here. Let's make a circle. And now we get this error, one of my all-time favorites. Adjacent JSX elements must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. The problem here is that we've got a path and a circle right next to each other coming back from this JSX, but they need to be enclosed in something. I'm going to use a React fragment just to get around that error. And that circle should be at the point of, the center. Well, actually, what should it be? It should be the point that contributes to that point of the line. So it's going to be a vertex of the line. That means that we're going to have to get access to that whole selected data element. Because, when we hover on these Voronoi overlay polygons, we're actually selecting a data point. And then we're using the country name of that point as the active country name. But really, maybe having an active country name is not the right thing to be having active. I mean, maybe we should have active a point. You mean a data point, a row from the data table. And then from that, we derive active country name. The next step here is to figure out where we're invoking set active country name so that we can change it to invoke, set active row. Yeah, set active row. Down in handle Voronoi hover, we actually have access to that column. So instead of saying set active country name, we could say set active row. And we just pass in D. And in this simple case, we can actually simplify this because it's just a function that takes as input D and then passes that into another function. So we can just pass in set active row to use callback. Yeah, I think that should work. And then we need to change country name to row. So now we've got active row and set active row. And then we console.log active row. And if there is an active row, then we use it here to test which line we should be highlighting. And so instead of comparing it to active country name, we compare it to active row dot country name. Yeah, and I think this should work still. Yeah. Okay, so now we have active row, which gives us the information we need to get the exact x and y coordinates for this circle of our label that we're going to place. So we've got this block of code here that only renders something if there is currently an active row. And in here is where we've got this circle, and we need to figure out Cx and Cy of this circle, which are the pixel coordinates. And our approach with the Voronoi was to extract these accessors from the line generator. We can say line generator.x of what would be D, but it's going to be called active row. Yeah, see, because when we created the line generator, we set the x accessor function to be this. It just takes the row and passes it through y value and y scale, and the same for y, but y has that epsilon to deal with the log scales. So we've got our Cx. Let's make our Cy. It's going to be line generator.y of active row. And in order to see the circle, we have to specify r, the radius, and I'll just say the radius will be 10. And let's try it. Okay, we get a circle that is not at the right spot. Oh, I think it's because, yes. We need to invoke x and y as functions, because when you invoke lineGenerator.x as a function, it returns the function that you passed into it earlier. And so, this statement here returns a function, and then that function gets called passing in the active row. So now it should work. All right, look at that. It works. Pretty sweet. That is awesome. The hovering doesn't seem to be, I don't know. It doesn't seem to be right, because see, look, I started moving over here, but it's not moving to where I'm hovering. I think there might be something wrong with which events are being caught by these polygons. So it looks like it only moves when I hover over the lines. See, if I jump to the internal part of something, it doesn't catch it. But if I hover over the line, then it catches it. It might have to do with fill being none on the... let me migrate to CSS for determining the fill and the stroke and stuff like that. I'm going to give this a class name. Oh, wait a minute. The parent already has a class name of Voronoi. So now we can style these paths in our CSS. Over here, we can say .Voronoi space path to select all the paths that fall within that Voronoi group element. And here we can say fill is none. And now, does the interaction still work? No, it doesn't. It does not. See that? And I think it has to do with this other property that we can set, namely pointer events. All. I think that should do the trick. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Yeah, so that's a little trick that you need to get this thing to work. Because if you don't have pointer events all, it doesn't get the events, because by default, if the fill is set to none, well, if you can't see it, you shouldn't be able to click on it, right? So it doesn't get the mouse events. But we want a specific scenario where it gets all the mouse events, even though it's invisible, because it's our trigger for interactions. And now, now that fill is none, this is a lot more smooth. And stroke is none, this is a lot more smooth, because the SVG rendering engine has less to do every time this changes. Yeah, so, okay, great. We're well on our way. Now we just need to add that label on this circle, or next to this circle, or above it, or below it. Let's see, what did they do in that other example? Yeah, this is from Mike Bostock's original, quite old multi-line Voronoi example. When you click on those links, it takes you here. What he did here was put the label on top. And that's a pretty elegant solution. When you go over here, it gets cut off a little. But, it's not the end of the world. And, we're really quite close to doing this. We just need to make a few changes. So over in linechart.js, here again is our friend, that bunch of code that only runs if there's an active row. Let's add into this a text element. And inside this text element, we can put some text. I'll just put foo for now. And then as we hover, I don't see it. Oh, that's because it doesn't have X and Y properly defined. And now that I think of it, the circle and the text, it might make sense to put those inside of a group element so that we can just translate the group element. I think I'll do that. I'll make a group element, set the transform to be, I'll close out the group element, put the circle and text inside, and the transform is going to be translate by something for X and something for Y. And that something for X is going to be lineGenerator.x of active row. And that something for Y is going to be lineGenerator.y of active row. And now we can get rid of the CX and CY definitions for our circle. And now let's see if this works. Okay, look at that. We get some text labels. Woohoo! Love the text labels. Now what? We need to clean this up a little bit. See, it doesn't really look that good. And it just says foo. It needs to say a bunch of other stuff. And that other stuff needs to come out of active row. So just to jog my memory, I'm going to say console.log active row. And as I hover, we get objects with country name, date, and death total. So we can access any of this inside of this text label that we're putting here. So we can say active row dot country name to put the label for the country. And now we can actually read this visualization a lot better than we ever could before. See that top line? That's Italy. Italy has had the highest number of deaths so far, cumulatively speaking. Next is, looks like Spain. Well, I got to improve these labels. But you get the idea. Let's read it in more detail once we improve the labels. One thing I notice about this text is that the alignment is not really what I would like. I'd like it to be centered. Or maybe, you know what, with this particular visualization, we can make a choice to make the labels extend to the left. That way, even if you hover over the very edge of it, you would get a readable label that's all on the screen for you. So for that, we can say SVG text align, text anchor. We can say text-anchor is end? Let's try that. Yeah, it looks like that works. That is good. That looks good. Now I'd like to move it a little bit farther away from that point because it's sort of intersecting with it. For that, we can just set the X of the text to be, I don't know, -4. I think it moved it, but just to make sure, let's say like, I don't know, -40. Yeah, now it's a little too far away. So let's say X is -10. And let's say Y is also -10 to give it a little more breathing room. Okay, now we can read it and interact quite smoothly and see that Italy is the top. Spain just overtook Iran for the highest number of deaths. And Spain's velocity or trajectory or the slope here, it looks vastly steeper than the one for Iran. There's France and the US, neck and neck. And then the UK is getting slammed right now. The Netherlands, Germany, Belgium, Switzerland. South Korea is really slowing down from what you can see here. Yeah, wow, this is fascinating. Fascinating. I want to improve the labels just a little bit more. I think they can include more information. Because when you hover over, you actually get the country, the date, and the number for that particular date. And so you could even formulate it as a sentence, like Italy, 1,000 deaths as of, and then put the date. Maybe that should be our label. Let's give that a try. So we've got activeRow.countryName, and activeRow is an object with country name, date, and death total. So let's bring in deaths total to our label. We can say country name, space, death total from the active row, and now our labels contain more information. It says Italy, 21 deaths, but it needs to really say as of which date. So let's add as of active row dot date. And there's an error here because active row dot date is not a string. I can tell you right now that's what this is about. So the thing is, we need to format the date for human consumption. And for that, we can use D3 time format. Here's how you can use D3 time format generally. You can say time format and give it a specifier for how to represent the date, and then you can just say format time and pass in a date object. So I think I like this format, June 30th. And I guess we could add the year too. It would make our label longer, but would be explicit, because I think it might go back into 2019. So let's try this. When we put our date here, I'm going to pass this through a formatting function, which I'm going to call format date. And this has not yet been defined, so at the top of the file, wait a minute, it has been defined. That's weird. What did I use that for? It says February 28th. I think I used that for the labels earlier, but I'm going to use a more explicit format because I think it demands this level of, formality. But see, it makes the label quite long. See, March is coming from that uppercase B. And if we change that to a lowercase b, it shortens it to MAR. All right, I think this is pretty good. We can just style the labels a little bit differently. I think I don't know. The text feels a little too big for this. Maybe it could be more similar to the axis labels. To do that, we can add class name to our text here. I'll call it Tooltip, and then we can go over into our CSS and add some CSS for Tooltip. And I kind of want them to look similar to the axis labels, so I think I'll just add that to here. .axis label, .tooltip to style the tooltips just like the axis labels. It's not quite right because I think it should be black though. So let me just override the fill of just the tooltips to be black. There we go. Unfortunately, you can't read some of these over here, but I think maybe that's acceptable. The main focus is what's happening over here. And I'm realizing as you get up here, it overlaps with the title. That's something we should fix. And also the number of deaths could be comma formatted. I see it's 2,503 deaths. That should be 2,503 with a comma. Yeah, so let me do that real quick. Yeah, in linechart.js, here's where we're putting the death total into the tooltip. So we can format comma active row.death total. And then we need to define format comma. I'll say format comma is not time format, but just format, and the format string specifier will be just a comma. And we need to import format from D3. Now when we hover over these, it says 2,987 with a comma. Let's address this one last thing of these overlapping labels here. I think we'll just make this title smaller and perhaps left justified. So here's our text label. It's being transformed to be in the middle. I think I'll remove that. And I think I'll also remove this text anchor middle, because the default text anchor, I believe, is start. Yeah, it looks pretty decent. And then I'll style this with CSS by giving it a class name of title. And then over in our CSS, we can make the title the same size as the axis label in the tooltip. Could add just .title there. But now it's a little too sedated. I think I'll make the tooltip and the title both black. Okay, this is working. I think this is fairly decent, although it still overlaps. I think we could even go smaller. 24 is actually pretty big. Let's try like 18. This is more like if you were to do it on print, this would look decent. But now we don't get that overlap anymore, so that problem is solved. That's good. That's good. One last thing I want to add here is that I want to add a little stroke around the text to make it pop in a situation like this, where it's black text on sort of a busy gray background. We can do that in the CSS of the tooltip by saying stroke is white. Let's see if it worked. Oh no, it's not as simple as I thought. I remember, this is a kind of a tricky situation where, yeah, to solve this, you need to actually have two text elements, one behind and one in front. The one in front is the one that we have now, and the one behind is the one that should be stroked, so that the stroke only goes outside the text and doesn't go inside it, which is what we're seeing now. So let's strategize a little. We can say there's going to be a new type of element that has a class of title-stroke. And that comes, conceptually behind the title. And that's the one where the stroke will be white. And we don't want to set the tooltip stroke to be white, just the title stroke. And it's not doing it yet because we haven't introduced the title stroke element. Yeah, so what we want to do is have another instance of the tooltip, but have it be behind, and give it a class name of tooltip-stroke. And this is bad practice with this copy-paste, but we can refactor that to make it all defined in one place, but just have two instances that vary in their class name. Okay, so we're seeing two of these, but I think I got the class names wrong in the CSS. Yeah, it shouldn't be title stroke, it should be tool. Now let's try that. Well, the font size needs to be the same as well. Okay, now I think it's working. But it's hard to see because the stroke width is not that much. So let's set the stroke width to something like 6 pixels. Now you can see the effect. See that? It gives a nice popping effect to those text labels. But I think 6 might be a bit extreme. Maybe let's say 2. A little subtle readability improvement. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe 3 is okay. And you know what? This is suffering from one of my personal pet peeves, which is the plurality used with the number 1. See, it says there, Moldova, 1 deaths as of March 20th. But if it's 1, it should say 1 death, not 1 deaths. So how can you solve this problem? This is a classic problem that comes up all over the place with different applications. So now that we've got 2 of these, we're feeling the pain of copy-pasting. I think I need to do the refactoring right now. And I'll just give it a name of tooltip. And we're going to have 2 of these, and the second one is going to be, well, we can just pass in the class name like this. Class name is tooltip stroke, and the class name for this other one, for the one behind, is just tooltip, and these should actually be reversed. Yeah, the tooltip stroke comes behind, and then the tooltip without the stroke comes on top. And then let's define tooltip as this logic here. So I cut that logic. We can define tooltip to be a function that returns a text element. And this needs to know about active row. Yeah. So this is a candidate for extracting into a separate module, but it's so small, so I'm just going to leave it there for now. All right, we've got a tooltip. The thing is, we need to take in that class name that we specified. So the class name is not always tooltip, but it's going to be whatever class name you pass in. And now it should be in working order again, I think. Oh, looks like it's broken. Ah, yeah, we need to pass in the active row. Now it should work. All right, it works. Sweet. Now that we've done this refactoring, we can solve the problem of that one case in one place, not twice. So let's deal with that problem now. Philippines, 1 deaths as of. So the deaths should be just death, 1 death. Let's solve that problem. So here's deaths, and the S is something that we can handle separately. And what we want to say here is if the active row dot death total is greater than 1, then add S. Otherwise, don't add anything. So now it says 1 death, but 2 deaths. Oh, but there's a space. Let's get rid of that space. Why is there a space there? Yeah, this is where it's getting a little messy to do it all like in line like this. You know what we could do is, instead of putting death outside, we could put death inside. Yeah, so if the death total is larger than 1, we use deaths. Otherwise, we use death. Is that going to work? 1 death. Oh, but now there's no space before it. There's no space before it. I think we do need to include something like this, which is kind of weird. But that's JSX. Okay, that looks decent. Yep. And you know what I'm kind of missing is the ability to hover over the right margin area and get something accurate. That might be possible. It's because the Voronoi overlay only goes up to the edge of this inner rectangle. But I'm curious, if we just extend that Voronoi overlay past inner width, I mean, what if we use inner width plus 100? Like, I think it should still work just fine. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's working. And we get some interactive space over here. That's great. That is cool. I think I'll keep that. Yeah. And down here, I don't think it makes sense to have any interaction. But, yeah, because there's so many overlapping points. But over here, it's definitely a big win. But just to be technically consistent, that value, 100, should actually be margin.right. And I don't believe we have access to margin yet here, so let's add margin as a prop to Voronoi overlay, and then where we invoke Voronoi overlay, we can pass in margin as a prop. And that margin, I believe, is defined at the top of this file. Yeah, there's the margin. And that could easily be made a prop. Doesn't really matter. All right, cool. Now we've got that interactive space on the right. We've got our Voronoi working. We've got our labels working. We got our title working. We got no overlaps. I'd say we have a pretty solid product here. Yeah, this is pretty cool. Pretty cool. So I think that about wraps it up. I'm pretty satisfied with this result. And so I think I'll call it a day. I think maybe I'll just do a quick overview. So yeah, this is the end product. We've got this multi-line chart where it says global coronavirus deaths over time by country. Each of these lines is a country. And it's cumulative deaths with a log scale. And we've got this Voronoi overlay that helps us get these tooltips working. And here's how the code is structured. Just real quick, I'll do an overview. Index.js loads in the data and invokes this line chart component. And this line chart component takes as input the data. We did use React use Memo to optimize the performance. So that's why it's so fast. It was really slow at some point. So that's where we're Memoizing everything that we can. Computing the X and Y scale, computing a line generator. Oh, I got some cruft. I'll get rid of that. And then this file produces an SVG and a group element to create the inner visualization rectangle, X-axis and Y-axis components. And then the new thing is we've got this notion of an active row. And so it renders this Voronoi overlay at the end, which puts these polygons on top. And actually, we can show that by with CSS. We've got this class of Voronoi. And in our CSS, we could just set fill to be, or let's set stroke to be black. Or how about green, just to see it. And so this is these are the polygons that have the event listeners that are setting the selected point. So yeah, that's what we built today. Cool. Yep, a lot of details. And I would encourage you, by the way, to fork some of this stuff and maybe try to modify it. One thing I wanted to do is to get this to work over the county data, which is newly released by Johns Hopkins. So if you have any free time and want to do a homework assignment, Awesome. Yeah, they just released the county level data this past week, and it's growing and growing. And so there's going to be a really sweet time series that comes out of it. So we could visualize it and see which U.S. counties are hit hardest and have it updating every day. It'd be super cool. All right, signing off. Take care, everyone. Bye.